Hi, this is Lee from the Law School Toolbox and the Bar Exam Toolbox. Welcome back to another episode of our Listen and Learn series. This one, we're discussing marriage formation and its requirements. Getting married in the United States is not as easy as they make it look in movies. You cannot just stumble your way into a Las Vegas chapel in the middle of the night and wake up married. It would be extremely difficult to accidentally marry someone. This is because there are many formal requirements and formal barriers to marriage in the United States. Before getting into formalities, it is important to note that each of these requirements may vary depending on the jurisdiction. If you are taking a state-specific course or exam, it is best to double-check these laws with your state's requirements. However, these are the requirements you will be responsible for knowing if you are taking the uniform bar exam or eventually the next-gen uniform bar exam. So let's start with a basic definition of marriage. Marriage is a relationship between two people as spouses that is recognized by law. There have been many United States Supreme Court decisions ruling on who can get married. In the 1967 Supreme Court case Loving v. Virginia, the court held that laws restricting marriage between interracial couples were unconstitutional. Similarly, in the 2015 Supreme Court case Obergefell v. Hodges, the court held that laws restricting marriage between same-sex couples were unconstitutional. Essentially, a marriage will be valid between any two people who meet the formal marriage requirements regardless of race or sex. The formal marriage requirements can be broken down into two categories. There are procedural requirements that the couple must comply with, as well as substantive requirements. I'll go through each one of these one by one. So let's start with the procedural requirements to get married. There are two that must be complied with. First, there must be a valid marriage license. Second, there must be a valid solemnization. Generally, to apply for a marriage license, both parties to the marriage must appear before a county official to obtain one. The couple must swear under oath basic information about themselves and that there are no impediments to marriage, like age restrictions or pre-existing marriages. Many states impose short waiting periods between the filing of the marriage license application and the issuance of the license. The reason for this waiting period is to encourage consideration and prevent impulsive decisions. This waiting period, though, can be waived by a judge if good cause exists for doing so. Solemnization is a legal term for a marriage ceremony between the couple. Once a marriage license is issued, solemnization can occur. This ceremony must be performed by a judicial officer, member of the clergy, or local official, and it must take place in front of witnesses. After the ceremony, the solemnizer must then sign the marriage license and return it to the county official who issued it. Most states require both parties to be present at the ceremony, which seems kind of obvious, but some states allow what is called a proxy marriage. This is when one or both of the parties are absent and an agent stands in for and acts on behalf of that person. This might sound like a strange concept, but proxy marriages are most often performed during wartime or for deployed service members, when one or both parties to the marriage cannot be present due to active deployment. In addition to these two procedural requirements, there are substantive requirements to get married. These substantive requirements include age, consanguinity, and affinity, bigamy, and mental capacity. First, most states require the persons getting married to be 18 before they can get married. Generally, though, if one or both of the parties is under 18, a state will still allow the marriage with parental, guardian, or judicial consent. Second, a marriage cannot violate consanguinity and affinity. Consanguinity means relation by blood, and affinity means relation by marriage or adoption. Marriages between two people who are related by whole or half-blood are prohibited, and many states prohibit marriages between two people related by affinity. About half of United States jurisdictions do, though, allow first cousins to get married. Third, a person is not allowed to enter into a new marriage if they are currently married to another person. This prohibition does not change even if the new marriage is entered into in good faith and under a belief that the original spouse is dead. In these situations, only the original marriage will be valid. Not only would the new marriage be invalid, but all parties aware of the bigamy can be subject to criminal and civil penalties. The only way to validate the new marriage is through the Uniform Marriage and Divorce Act, or UMDA. The UMDA allows parties in the new marriage to validate their marriage if two requirements are met. First, that they entered into the new marriage in good faith with no knowledge of the original marriage. Second, the couple has lived together and continues to live together as a married couple after the impediment has been removed by death or dissolution. The final substantive requirement is mental capacity. To enter into a marriage, both parties must have the requisite mental capacity to consent to the marriage, and there must not be any fraud or duress. If a person is unable to understand the nature of the marriage contract, whether that is due to mental infirmity or intoxication, then they will not have the capacity to get married. In addition, a marriage can be invalidated through fraud if there was a material misrepresentation or failure to disclose information that induced the other person to marry. Examples of material misrepresentations are issues of engaging in sexual relations, bearing children, and wealth. Duress will make a marriage voidable when a party enters into a marriage due to fear of harmful consequences to them or their loved ones. Clearly, marriage is a little more complicated than we see in the movies. A couple must fulfill the procedural requirements of obtaining a valid marriage license and participating in a valid solemnization. In addition, a couple must fulfill the substantive requirements of age, consanguinity and affinity, bigamy, and mental capacity. If all of these requirements are satisfied, then the couple will be validly married. There is one main exception to these requirements, and that is the situation of a common law marriage. A select few states will formalize a common law marriage, and even those states that will not formalize one will recognize one if it was validly entered into in another state. A common law marriage is a marriage between two people who failed to comply with the procedural marriage requirements, either by not obtaining a marriage license or failing to have their marriage solemnized by a ceremony. Common law marriage, then, is an exception to the procedural marriage requirements. The substantive marriage requirements, like capacity and age, must still be satisfied. A common law marriage will be considered a valid marriage, and the couple will get all of the protections and rights as any other marriage if three requirements are satisfied. First, the couple must consent to be married. This consent to be married must be immediate, meaning a couple cannot be considered common law married if they agree to be married at some future date. Second, the couple must cohabitate. This means that the parties must live together like a married couple would. Generally, this means more than sharing a residence and having a sexual relationship. The couple must act like a married couple as well, like sharing home maintenance and financial responsibilities. Third, the couple must hold themselves out to the public as being married. In the eyes of their friends, family, and the general public, the couple must be married, not merely partners. If these three requirements are satisfied, as well as the substantive requirements, then in a state that formalizes common law marriages, a couple will have a valid marriage. So let's put all of this law to the test with a couple of hypotheticals. This one is adapted from the July 2002 California bar exam. In 1997, Hank and Wanda began dating regularly. In 1999, Wanda and Hank got married. Unbeknownst to Wanda and Hank, their marriage was never formalized because they failed to get a marriage license. After their wedding ceremony, Wanda moved in with Hank and the two shared their finances. Wanda and Hank regularly went out to dinner with other couples, celebrated their anniversary, and referred to each other as husband and wife. Would Hank and Wanda's relationship be considered a valid marriage? Well, what do you think? Let's work through the requirements. We can assume the substantive requirements are met because there are no facts telling us that Hank and Wanda are not of age, had previous marriages, are related by blood or otherwise, or lack capacity. But what about the procedural requirements? Hank and Wanda did have a ceremony, so the solemnization requirement is satisfied. However, the facts tell us that the couple failed to get a marriage license, meaning they did not satisfy all procedural requirements and do not have a valid marriage. The only recourse Hank and Wanda would have is if their jurisdiction allows for a common law marriage. As a reminder, to have a valid common law marriage, there must be consent, cohabitation, and the couple must hold themselves out to be married. Hank and Wanda did consent to being married because they had a marriage ceremony, implying they intended to be married at that moment. They also cohabitated because the couple moved in together and shared finances after their ceremony. Finally, Hank and Wanda did represent themselves as married because they regularly went to dinner with other couples, celebrated their anniversary, and referred to each other as husband and wife. This means that in the majority of jurisdictions, Hank and Wanda would not actually be married. However, if the jurisdiction they live in formalizes common law marriages, then Hank and Wanda would actually be married. Let's try another hypothetical. This one is adapted from the February 2008 California bar exam. Harvey and Fiona entered into a valid marriage in 1995. Harvey abandoned Fiona after 2 months. Harvey then met Wendy. He told her that he was single, and they married in 1997. Harvey and Wendy began living together after their wedding. In 2006, Harvey learned Fiona had died. Harvey decided to continue to not tell Wendy about Fiona, and that he was ever married before his marriage to Wendy. Harvey and Wendy continued to live together until Wendy's death in 2019. Were Harvey and Wendy ever validly married? To figure out if Harvey and Wendy were ever validly married, we need to go through the procedural and substantive requirements of a marriage. Now, this fact pattern does not give us too many facts about the procedural requirements of the marriage, so we will assume the couple obtained a valid marriage license and had a valid solemnization. In terms of the substantive requirements, we are not given information about whether Harvey and Wendy satisfy the age, relationship, and mental capacity requirements, so we will assume they are satisfied. We are, however, given information about the prohibition against bigamy. As a reminder, a person is not allowed to enter into a new marriage if they are currently married to another person. Here, Harvey was validly married to Fiona when he married Wendy. This means that only Harvey and Fiona's marriage is valid, not the marriage between Harvey and Wendy. However, before we can end the analysis, there is one more consideration. The UMDA does allow parties in a marriage to validate their bigamous marriage if they entered into that marriage in good faith, and if the couple has lived together and continues to live together after the original marriage ended due to death or dissolution. Harvey and Wendy do satisfy the cohabitation requirement because the facts tell us that the couple lived together from 1997 until Wendy's death in 2019, and Fiona died in 2006. However, although Wendy might have entered into the new marriage in good faith because she was told by Harvey that he was single before they got married, Harvey did not. Harvey knew that he was still currently married to Fiona, lied to Wendy about his marital status when they met, and continued to lie after he found out that Fiona had died. This means Harvey did not enter into his marriage with Wendy in good faith because he did have knowledge of the original marriage. I mean, he was there, right? So not only does this mean that Harvey and Wendy were never actually married, but it also means that Harvey will likely be subject to possible criminal and civil penalties. So I'll wrap up with a summary of what we've talked about. To enter into a valid marriage, a couple must comply with procedural and substantive requirements. Procedurally, the couple must obtain a valid marriage license and participate in solemnization. In jurisdictions that allow it, some couples can substitute these procedural requirements with satisfying the elements of a common law marriage. On the substantive side, the persons getting married need to be of a certain age, not be closely related, not be previously married, and have the requisite mental capacity. It is only if all of these requirements are satisfied that a couple will enter into a valid marriage. Well, that's all we have for today. I'm glad you could join me as we discussed marriage formation and its requirements. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like, leave us a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can also learn more about what we do at lawschooltoolbox.com and barexamtoolbox.com.